Hey everybody, welcome back to another video. So recently I've been living in Colorado Springs since August of 2021, and I've seen some pretty wild weather shifts that I'm not really used to, being from California. This state has pretty big temperature swings, and I think it's because in California we're close to an ocean, which probably serves some role in regulating the temperature, whereas here we're close to the mountains and it does no such thing. In fact, it might do the opposite. About 3 to 4 days ago here, it was sunny and it was 70 degrees, but now it's 23 and it's snowy. And I thought I'd come out here and record a video on the topic of cold. What is cold? And what does it do to things? What would it do to you? And what are the coldest things in the universe? These are questions that I seek to answer in this video today. So if you're interested, please sit back, enjoy this video in the comfort of your own home. Hopefully it's warmer than it is out here. Okay, so what is cold really? Well, cold, as you've probably learned in school, is not really its own thing. It's the absence of heat. So what is heat? Well, there's an entire branch of science that's dedicated to the pursuit of that question. It's called thermodynamics. This branch of science, physics and chemistry mostly, seeks to understand heat, how it flows, and its relation to energy in general. The science of thermodynamics was strongly motivated by the Industrial Revolution, when steam power started to become a thing. People were able to tap into the energy present by burning various fuels. These fuels included coal, wood, you name it. We still burn it, you know it. In that sense, nothing has really changed. The motivation during the Industrial Revolution was for a field of science that could make engines more efficient, extract this energy, and perform more work as a result of burning various substances and exuding heat from those substances. As a result of this pursuit of efficiency and a lack of technological sophistication and atomic theory and things like that, thermodynamics was primarily concerned with the properties of heat as opposed to the mechanism by which it exists and what it really is physically. Heat is basically the energy that goes from a hot body to a cold body when they're in contact. An interesting symmetry presents itself here. You could consider coldness as its own thing by the definition of heat that I've just given. You could consider an energy flowing from a cold object to a hot object, a sort of coldness. Now, this symmetry kind of breaks down when we look at the mechanisms by which heat actually exists in atoms, in molecules, and substances. But it's an interesting symmetry to think about nonetheless, and there are various symmetries in physics that behave this way. One example of this is a hole amidst a sea of electrons that we can consider moving as its own particle. Okay, if you want me to get into that and into the wild weirdness of electrons, I can do that in a future video. Go ahead and like this video, comment that you'd like to see that, and subscribe so you're informed when that video goes up. But yeah, a hole in electrons can behave as a particle of its own. So you can kind of consider the absence of something to have its own physical properties as though it were a thing. But we'll come back to that at the end of the video. So as I said before, heat is related to temperature. So what's temperature? To get into what temperature is, we need to look at a little bit of molecular dynamics. So molecules in a solid, liquid, gas, they don't stand still. Molecules are always moving. Each molecule has some velocity. That net velocity may be zero, as in the object doesn't go anywhere. For example, if I had a tennis ball, all of the molecules in that tennis ball are moving. But because they're all moving in different directions and they're always colliding with each other, the tennis ball doesn't just fly off in some direction. It has a net velocity of zero. However, it does not have a net speed of zero, meaning the magnitude of the velocities of each of those molecules is something and can be added together. Temperature is a measurement of the average speed of each molecule in a given substance. In a cold object, like my hands right now, the molecules are moving very sluggishly, very slowly. In a hot object, like a cup of tea, for example, that was recently boiling, the molecules, the water molecules in that tea would be bouncing around like crazy, bumping into each other. The way that heat is transferred between two objects of different temperatures is that the violently vibrating molecules in one, when you put a cold object up against it, those violently moving molecules will smack into the sluggish molecules and kind of kick them into gear, making them move faster, and that heat propagates. And that's why heat spreads and temperature evens out over time. So when a cold wind brushes your skin, what's happening is the cold, sluggishly moving air molecules, yes, they're flowing by, so their net velocity is greater than zero, but each molecule's individual movement is pretty sluggish relative to what the random motion in air could be. When that wind brushes by your skin, those slow-moving molecules are smacked into by the quickly moving molecules in your arm, for example, and your arm's molecules slow down as a result of that collision, and the molecules in the air speed up as a result of that collision. Heat is going from you to the wind. If we go back to that symmetry we talked about before, you could think about the wind putting coldness into you. But again, it's a barely useful thing. It's just interesting to think about. The limit of coldness, then, based on what we've just said, would be when molecules approach a complete standstill in a substance. This state is known as absolute zero. It would be a temperature of zero. The speed of each molecule would be 0 miles per hour, meters per second, whatever. Of course, in the real world, there are contaminations, leaks. The vessel that you're holding your chemical in that you'd like to cool down to absolute zero may impart a little bit of heat into it, may get those molecules moving slightly. And so it takes more and more energy, and it's more and more difficult to approach absolute zero. Okay, so what does cold do to you, the human body? Well, the body has two responses that I'll speak of in this video to cold stimulus. One of them is the constriction of blood flow to extremities, and the other one is shivering to produce heat. Now, shivering, like I just said, produces heat, but constriction of blood flow to the extremities does not produce any heat. It simply conserves your core temperature at the cost of your extremities. It's a sacrifice play, and this sacrifice of your digits may cause numbness, frostbite, and even necrosis, requiring that your digits be amputated to prevent infection. If your core temperature begins to drop too low, you may experience hypothermia. And now, reading from my list of symptoms that I've brought with me in my notes, hypothermia has the following symptoms: sweating, flushing, tachycardia, fatigue, lightheadedness, headache, paresthesis, muscle cramps, oliguria, whatever that is, nausea, agitation, hypotension, syncope, confusion, delirium, seizures, and finally, coma. I don't know some of those words, but I definitely know all of them are bad. And so because of that, and because my hands are starting to freeze and get numb, like I told you about before, I'm going to go inside.